Is there such a thing as too much meat? Keep watching to find out if you're truly prepared for a barrage of beef, or if you're making a big mistake.
Gentlemen, I give you the future. Beef.
If you plan on cooking all your bulk steak at once, like if you're hosting an event, you'll want to look for steaks of similar sizes at the grocery store. If you have steaks of all different shapes and thicknesses, you'll end up having to juggle to ensure you're cooking each steak to the appropriate doneness. To make cooking your many simultaneous steaks as easy as possible, try to purchase 1-inch steaks all around. Typically, a 1-inch steak will require about 5 minutes per side to be considered rare, and up to a total of 30 minutes for well done. Regardless of how long you cook your steaks, always let them rest for 5 to 10 minutes before cutting and serving. This rest time is important as it allows the meat to finish cooking. Plus, if you don't let cooked meats rest before you cut right into them, you're more likely to end up with a dry steak, as the juices aren't able to be redistributed throughout the entire piece of meat. You can usually get a better deal on meat if you buy in larger quantities, and this doesn't just apply to buying individual cuts of meat in bulk. You can also save money by purchasing larger cuts of meat and then breaking them down into smaller individual cuts on your own at home. When it comes to steak, your larger cuts will be limited in the grocery store, at least compared to what you could buy directly from a farm. However, you can still find a few select larger pieces that can be broken down into smaller pieces, like a beef tenderloin. When sliced into medallions, this long cut of meat transforms into delicious filet mignon. On average, if you have a 5-pound tenderloin, you can turn it into 6 filet mignon steaks. If you can get your hands on an even larger cut, like a beef strip loin, you can turn that into a New York strip. A 14-pound strip loin can be cut into about 10 New York strip steaks. To break down large cuts at home, you won't necessarily need any fancy kitchen equipment, just a sharp knife that's 8 to 10 inches long. You'll also want a cutting board, ideally large enough to safely hold the cut of meat. If you want to purchase more than your grocery store has in stock, or if you want specific or larger cuts that your grocery store doesn't carry, you may want to go directly to a local farmer. Doing so comes with a range of benefits. First and foremost are the savings, since buying wholesale instead of retail is generally cheaper. If there are multiple farms in your region that offer the option to buy your beef directly from them, you'll also be able to choose the farm that uses processes that align with your values. Some farmers will also allow you to directly choose how the meat is processed, in case you want specific cuts or cuts of certain sizes.
100% pure organic, grass-fed, AAA Alberta beef.
You've likely seen pre-seasoned steaks at the store. They're usually vacuum sealed and covered in a marinade with lots of visible herbs and spices. If cooked quickly, marinades and seasonings can turn a steak into a totally tender and deliciously flavored entree. But if they're left for a while, the marinade can do your steak more harm than good. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, marinades begin to negatively impact the quality of meat after just 2 days, as the marinade essentially begins eating away at the meat texture. This is because marinades typically contain an acid, like vinegar or citrus juice, and acids break down proteins. As the protein strands break down under the acid's influence, the meat initially becomes more tender and more flavorful, as your marinade can access more surface area of the meat thanks to that deteriorating protein. However, let this process go on too long, and things turn bad. The meat becomes mushy and mealy. If you want to marinate your steak, do it when you're thawing it, allowing the frozen steak to thaw in the marinade for up to 24 hours, but no longer. Otherwise, things can get a little gross.
What are sloppy steaks?
It's a steak with water dumped on it. It's really, really good.
If you're going to buy enough steak to last you for months or even years to come, you'll want to be strategic. As the USDA notes, steak can only be safely stored in the refrigerator for up to 5 days, but can be frozen indefinitely. But after a couple of years of freezing, many people note that the quality of your meat will start to decrease. However, if you invest in a vacuum sealer, the quality of your food can last quite a bit longer. Properly vacuum-sealed steaks can remain in your freezer for 3 to 5 years without losing integrity, as the sealing process reduces freezer burn significantly. However, if you're not using a vacuum sealer, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration recommends taking some extra precautions. If you want to leave the steaks in their original packaging from the store, you should add another layer of packaging, as store packaging is usually too thin for long-term use. This extra exterior layer should be as airtight as possible. The FDA recommends using a plastic bag, heavy-duty aluminum foil, freezer paper, or plastic wrap. No matter how you buy your bulk steak, know how much your freezer can hold before you make that purchase. Keep in mind that you won't be storing just steak in your freezer either. You'll need extra room for any other frozen foods you usually have around. What's a safe way to know how much beef your freezer can hold? According to Oklahoma State University, you can expect to store 35 to 40 pounds of packaged beef per cubic foot of freezer space. A typical chest freezer offers up to 17 cubic feet of space, but most households rely on whatever small freezer space is built into their fridge. To measure your freezer space in cubic feet, measure the freezer depth, height, and width in feet, and multiply the numbers to get your total. Even if you store your bulk steak in a clear package, it can become pretty difficult to tell one piece of frozen meat from another after a few months. Sure, you know it's a steak, but there's a lot more you need to know when brooding around in the freezer for dinner. According to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, whenever storing a food item in your freezer long term, use freezer-safe labels or freezer tape, as well as a writing utensil that won't easily smudge. Record what the item is, how many servings are included, and when you repackaged and froze it. If you're using a permanent marker, be sure to label each packaged cut before you freeze it. If you freeze your steak in reusable plastic or glass containers, don't skip labeling. If you don't have tape, you can still write on the container and erase your note using rubbing alcohol once it's no longer needed. But be sure to test this before you ruin any of your containers. If you can't find the steak you want in bulk quantities at the store, look online. You can find a range of retailers that offer to ship bulk quantities of meat right to your door. Some are wholesalers that primarily sell to restaurants, some offer subscriptions, and some allow you to buy a portion of a cow directly from a farmer. If you order bulk steak online, make sure you're ready and waiting for it when it arrives. Most meat is shipped vacuum sealed, already frozen, and in insulated packaging, along with freezer packs or dry ice. If your meat was shipped using dry ice, transfer the steaks directly to the freezer, unless you plan on eating some of them in the next 24 hours. Allow the dry ice to evaporate. You don't want to touch it directly, and don't let your kids or pets around it. Direct contact with dry ice can cause serious burns and can rupture skin cells. Many shoppers who stock up on bulk quantities of steak are doing so because they want to save money. One way you can easily save even more money is by stocking up on cheaper cuts of steak that are particularly good for serving a crowd. While prime rib or filet mignon may be what you cook when you want a nice meal for yourself, they're not exactly cost-effective for feeding the entire family at a barbecue or over the holidays. Instead of pricier cuts, for occasions like these, consider going with larger strip steaks that you can further break down for more servings per steak. Flat iron steaks are good for grilling, and sirloin or flank steaks can be broken down for recipes that require smaller portions of cubed steak. If you're trying to go as budget-friendly as possible to feed a crowd, look for recipes that can make your steak go further, such as steak salads, kebabs, or fajitas. No matter how long you keep your bulk steak in the freezer, it's always smart to know the signs of a steak gone bad. A spoiled steak may have a slimy layer on top and smell slightly like ammonia or eggs. All of this can make for a steak dinner that smells and tastes quite unpleasant, leaving a lot to be desired. The U.S. Department of Agriculture notes that spoilage bacteria on food isn't likely to make you ill. Spoilage bacteria tends to make things mushy and lose their texture. Instead, you're much more likely to become sick due to pathogenic bacteria, which grows on food when it sits for an extended amount of time at a temperature between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. In most cases, pathogenic bacteria doesn't affect the taste or texture of the food at all.
Many times when you have a stomach bug, what you think of as a stomach bug, it's really some form of foodborne illness.
If you suspect you have food poisoning from affected steak, you can usually treat your symptoms at home by waiting them out, staying hydrated, and avoiding any foods or substances that might further irritate your gastrointestinal system. If symptoms have not improved within 48 hours, a primary care provider may treat you with probiotics, antibiotics, or measures to prevent severe dehydration.